Now, the next question is actually from someone who isn't wrestling with the evidence for the existence of God, but actually they're more struggling with the character of God, and particularly how he sees them. And this is a question from Susan, who asks, I'm a Christian, but I have some feminist leanings, which makes it hard to understand what my role should look like as a woman per the Bible. What does it mean to obey God while also desiring to be valued as a woman? And Susan, I'm so glad that you asked this question. It's one that's very dear to my heart. I wrestled with this for so many years that actually I wound up doing my PhD research in an area related to this question precisely because I really wanted to understand, how does God see women and what does the Bible have to say about it? And I think this is really good the way you phrase the question, because there's something very hard about it's hard to be comfortable in a relationship with somebody if you feel insecure about how they see you and whether they value you, or if they value other people more than they value you. And especially that idea of trusting somebody in a way where you would obey them is difficult if you're not confident that actually they have your best in mind. And so I think you're asking the right question here. I can remember as a teenager reading The Great Gatsby for the first time, and the words of Daisy Buchanan just lodged in my mind. She says this about her daughter: I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. And I remember reading those words and thinking, is that what the Bible has to say about me too, that I should be seen and not heard, that I'm ornamental and decorative, but really didn't have much to contribute, not much meaning or purpose in the world. But to my delight, as I dug into scripture, particularly over years of studying it, I actually came to find the complete opposite was true to the rumors that I've been hearing about how God sees women in the Bible. And actually, we don't even have to go very far. If we start on the very first chapter, in Genesis chapter 1, we read that God made humankind in his image, male and female, he created them. And it's fascinating to me that it didn't need to spell that out. You know, it could have just said it made man in his image, but someone was being very particular about the fact when we talk about these unique beings, equally and significantly made to image God, to represent him, we're talking about male and female. Now, the importance of that may not strike you from our 21st century perspective, but contrast it with other ancient worldviews, like that of Plato in the 5th century BC, who commented that actually it's only males who are created directly by the gods and are given souls, and that those who live rightly return to the stars, but those who are cowards may with reason be supposed to have changed into the nature of women in the second generation. Sorry, ladies, it's not very flattering. But when you contrast that with what the Bible is saying, it's absolutely radical. And it makes me so sad when I meet feminists who will tell me I'm too feminist actually to believe the Bible, because I think, what other ground do you have to stand on? You know, if you look at naturalism and survival of the fittest, that goes by might makes right and every man for himself. And where's equal value in that? Whereas with Christianity, right at the beginning, you're given a foundation to stand upon as a woman that God says, actually, you have an innate worth that can never be taken away from you. And that kind of valuing runs all the way through the Bible. Now, it's certainly true in the Old Testament, we read a lot of horrendous stories and we see women treated in some really appalling ways. But actually, the reason for that is because the Bible doesn't shy away from telling a true story about both the extreme highs and lows of human behavior. And in that sense, I'm actually grateful for what we find there, because it means we can't accuse the Bible of holding some kind of religious cover-up or trying to disguise the way that people have been mistreated. Actually, it lays it all bare in a very clear way, I think, for us to learn from, so that we don't go and do likewise. But also because we consistently see throughout Scripture God protecting, often through legal codes, sometimes through direct intervention, the very women who the men within their culture are taking advantage of and abusing. And not only does he provide justice for those women, but actually he sometimes even uses women to enable justice. And if you're thinking about what roles you could have according to the Bible as a woman, I find it remarkable that 3,000 years before the first US Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, was appointed, the first woman to that position, 3,000 years earlier, Deborah was appointed as judge of all Israel, both as a military leader, presiding over a court where people would come to her to make legal decisions. And then she ruled over the nation of Israel for a long time as a very successful ruler, bringing peace to the land. Throughout the Bible, we see women who are risking their lives to save other people's lives, and they're celebrated for it. We see women who are praised for their entrepreneurial savvy and their creative financial ingenuity. We see women who are put in positions of great influence in order to be able to save a nation. And we see women who are anointed by God to speak as prophets on his behalf to kings. So we see women in remarkable positions, and that only carries on in the New Testament as well. You don't really see Jesus interacting with a woman in a single occasion where he isn't dramatically overturning the culture of that time in the way that he treats them. And that carries on in the early church as well. For example, the teaching on marriage in Christianity, when Paul makes this radical statement in the New Testament that actually not only does a wife's body belong to her husband, but a husband's body belongs to his wife. Or, often people get offended by the statement that a wife should submit to her husband, which in our culture today, the language of that is troublesome for us, but we overlook the context of that text when actually the really radical thing that Paul is saying is that husbands should love their wives to such a sacrificial degree that, like Jesus Christ, they're willing to lay down their lives for her day in and day out. So time and again, we see this amazing vision, a transformative, radical vision for the position and the value of women within Christianity. Even Paul, when he's writing to women, he calls them his co-workers in the early church. There's Lydia, who hosts a house church. We know the 4 unmarried daughters of Philip who are prophesying. There's Phoebe, who's a deacon, Junia, who's praised as being outstanding among the apostles, Priscilla and Aquila, a husband and wife teaching team. We see women fulfilling all kinds of roles, even within the New Testament church. So when I read these scriptures, far from being discouraged or disheartened, I'm so amazed. I think if you're a woman and you're looking for a worldview that values women, this is the one for you. Not only does it have a perspective on valuing women, but it gives you a foundation for that I don't think you will find in any other worldview. When I look at Jesus Christ, I see exactly the kind of man I want to spend time with and exactly the kind of God that it is honestly a joy and privilege to worship. And if you're wondering as a woman about Christianity tonight, then really it is an honor to commend it to you this evening.
I just find it so encouraging listening to you both speak, because so many people might think science disproves God. And you didn't respond to that from a defensive standpoint, but said, no, actually, if you understand it correctly, only God proves science. And so many people think that I couldn't possibly be a Christian or take Jesus seriously because of what I believe about the value of women. And you're saying, no, if you believe that women are valued, Jesus is exactly the person to go to. So I just appreciate both the answers you've given.
It's definitely what we both found to be true.
Indeed.